Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings to you. Well, I imagine if you are listening to this show, you care about relationships and you want to have better relationships or to keep your relationships as great as they are or whatever it is. And you know that very often when we love someone and we love them over time, we have marriage vows that talk about in sickness and in health, and we have friends, people who can get sick and be infirm and have an accident, or something can happen to them that seriously changes their lives and our own. So if you are in a position like this, or you think you might be at some time, if you want to be committed to a long-term relationship, or you know people who are in such a situation, stay tuned, because I'm very happy to introduce you to Amy Schaefer Crawley, who is a member of a group called the Well Spouse Association. And it is a wonderful, wonderful thing to find support groups anywhere and everywhere we can. I am a firm supporter of support groups. So welcome, Amy, and thanks for coming on Just Relationships.
Well, thank you for having me, Duffy.
Oh, my pleasure. So tell us about you and how it is you became a member of the Well Spouse Association.
Well, I've been married to my husband, Jim, for about 20 years, and just about 2 or 3 years into our marriage, he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And as you mentioned in your introduction, it changed the dynamic immediately and drastically. And it was something I was not prepared for. And when you enter something like this, yes, of course, you take your vows in sickness and in health, but you think, well, maybe it's the flu or a broken leg. But you don't think of sickness as something as catastrophic. In this case, and it was, of course. So after many years of being angry and resentful and not knowing how to navigate anything, I looked online for online support groups, and I found the Well Spouse Association. And when I found it, I cried because I said to myself, oh my gosh, I didn't know there were other people doing what I do.
Wow.
It was, so I went online, I joined immediately. It's only $30 a year, and of course, if you have financial difficulties, we will make other arrangements for you. But there's an online forum. We have respite weekends. We have an annual conference. We have mentorship, and I am a mentor. And I'm overwhelmed because other people are doing what I'm doing and are going through emotionally what I'm going through.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
What else is interesting, too, is that caregivers are often very hidden. You might be at the grocery store, and I will bet you anything that you come within 10 or 12 people who are caregivers in some regard. Sometimes I consider a trip to the grocery store a respite.
Yes. Wow.
It's like, wow, I can get away from my husband for a couple minutes.
Sure.
And I often find the longest line to stand in.
Yes.
So I grab one of those trashy magazines and read it, and that's kind of my respite sometimes.
Surely. I like the way you use the term respite rather than escape per se. And so escape has a negative connotation, and respite is a very, very, very healthy thing to do.
I appreciate that, Duffy, because one of the things that caregivers often feel is guilt. It's a major thing. We feel guilty that we're not doing enough. We feel guilty that we're doing too much. We feel guilty if we go out and we have lunch with a friend. We feel guilty if we get away. But these are all things about self-care.
Right.
And you know the adage about self-care.
Yes.
About putting on your own oxygen mask first. And that's what we have to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how is it different, Amy? How does the group help from like before and after the Well Spouse Association? Well, we are a peer-to-peer support group. And it's just a comfort knowing that you are not alone. And in fact, that is one of our mottos. We have twin mottos. One is, you are not alone. And the second motto is, when one is sick, two need help. Oh.
It's very powerful. It's a very powerful motto. And it's just knowing that other people are cleaning up poop or not able to sleep at night or, have anger and rage issues. These are all commonalities that we all share.
Yes.
We all never expected this.
Mm-hmm.
And
didn't sign up for it in a way, Amy, right? Because
Absolutely.
Even though we take the vows in sickness and in health, do we really mean it? I mean, do we really know, as you say, we don't think about catastrophe?
Absolutely. And some catastrophes happen immediately. We have people on the website, the forum, whose spouses suffered a traumatic brain injury or some sort of paralysis as a result of an accident.
Oof.
Yeah. And then others, like me, have a spouse who is diagnosed with a chronic illness, and then they've witnessed decline over several years.
Mm.
And we don't compare, we share.
Mm.
People will come on board onto the forum and they'll say, well, my problems aren't as great as everyone else's. And we say, but your reactions and your emotions are the same.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, Amy, even the way you just put it a moment ago that, I'd love to get away from him. I'll go on the longest line. It's as if you're giving yourself permission to feel the annoyance, the anger, the impatience. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing, and I have a guess that you also share it with your husband. Or in a way. I think there's a way to normalize these things.
Well, then I would like to know how to do that.
Yeah.
Because what often happens with me, and I don't know if this is typical with spousal caregivers or caregivers in general, is that we wait until a situation is just so frustrating that we blow up. That's how I react, and I need to work on that. And it's very, very difficult to sit down with your spouse and say, this is very hard for me.
Mm.
Because the focus is so much on them and their needs.
Yes.
And your needs tend to get cast off to the side. And also that's another guilt-inducing feeling is, hi, hon, you know what? Caring for you is really difficult for me.
Mm.
Where does it go from there? What can your spouse possibly say?
Mm-hmm.
If you have a good relationship, then the spouse can say, honey, I'm very, very sorry. I wish I could do more. I'm sorry I put you in this.
Mm.
That is a hallmark of a strong relationship. When you have an illness or some sort of paralysis or whatever, that relationship can erode very, very quickly, no matter how strong the intentions.
Right, right. So I am thinking, as a psychotherapist, I use a therapeutic model called the internal family system, where we look at the psyche as having different parts, and that we all have a true self or an essential self or a larger self, the self with a capital S, our center of wisdom, if you will. And then we all have wounded parts that haven't quite healed in our feeling phobic society, where feelings are not allowed, and so we push them underground and we exile them from our consciousness. And these wounded parts in this model are actually called exiles. And then we have protector parts that protect the wounded parts. And in mainstream psychology, it's called defense mechanisms. But the reason I'm bringing it up now is because I think it's very useful for people to realize that we all have parts. There's nothing pathological about it. There's nothing like the Three Faces of Eve, or what's the other famous one? I don't remember. It'll come to me.
Sybil.
Sybil, right? Sybil. I think she had 16.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not pathological. It's just that we get traumatized at certain points in our lives, and then the brain doesn't process the trauma, so it kind of stays stuck there. So this little 4-year-old is somewhere in our psyche, and he or she is running the show, and yet we don't even know it because we're not so conscious of that. It's in our subconscious. So anyway, the reason I'm saying this now is that I believe it's a matter of I love you and.
I love that, Duffy. That's so lovely. Because it's non-defensive.
Right.
And it doesn't put them on the defensive.
Right. Yes. So
I love that.
Yeah. So, I love you, and I'm devoted to you, and you are my pleasure as a person. You are precious, and I have made you my lifelong choice, and I didn't sign up for this.
Right.
And a part of me, just a part, feels anxious, scared, annoyed, resentful.
Right.
And I have these other parts, and I just want you to know that they're there, because you're probably going to find out anyway,
In the worst possible moment.
Yes, right? Yeah. So we really can't hide them. There's emotional leakage.
Oh, I like that, emotional leakage.
Yeah. So,
also, too, when you're a woman and you're taking care of a man who is ill, the man wants to fix everything.
yes.
Whereas the woman just wants to talk.
Mm-hmm.
And I have found the times that my husband and I have talked about it, I feel closer to him.
Mm.
And if I were to say to him, I feel this, I feel that, then I feel better afterwards.
Yes.
When I'm heard. And sometimes it's all we need, is just to be heard and understood.
Right.
And, honey, I'm sorry you're in this position. I wish it were different, and I appreciate you.
Right.
And go get a manicure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, my husband may not be able to make me a cup of tea,
Mm-hmm.
but he can say, you need a massage, go get a massage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is taking care of me.
Right. And I think that gratitude is so healing. And unfortunately, what happens with folks who are together for quite some time, they become so familiar to each other that kind of like an old slipper, which is very, very comfortable, but taken for granted.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
caregivers often feel like they are taking for granted. Absolutely. I'm fortunate in that my husband does thank me for everything.
Mm.
He does. And I remember many years ago, I was at the gym, and I was in the locker room, and I was talking to a woman who had a friend, and this friend's husband was also in a wheelchair. And the woman was saying to me that he torments her. And she said to me, he's in a wheelchair, for God's sake. And I'm thinking to myself, but words hurt.
Mm.
And
Yes.
if you're the type of person who was a nasty person before an illness or a catastrophic happening, then you're going to be a nasty person afterwards.
Right.
Yes, there are